All right, let me see if I can get through this. So, I haven't talked a lot about Roschon Johnson, and it's not because I don't like his talent. I actually think he could be the best running back out of the class, and that's not a knock against Bijan, his college teammate. It's just that Roschon Johnson has a three down skill set in a way that Bijan doesn't translate with Bijan. Like, I'm not keeping Bijan in the game to pass block in the way that I will leave a 6'3", 225-pound back into pass block. Roschon can play all three downs. He's a little slow for what you want for like a top end running back, but a guy that you just leave on the field and plays like 80, 90% of snaps in all situations. I mean, these guys don't grow on trees, and I'm not that interested in him from a fantasy perspective, because the story that we need to tell to get Roschon Johnson to even weekly usage, not even league winner, just weekly usage is very difficult, because he's behind Khalil Herbert, who's the number one running back, who's a very efficient running back. And then the Bears went out and signed Deonta Foreman, and they didn't cut him, and he had usage last week. And then on top of that, the starting quarterback for the Bears, I was listening to some of these guys talk this week, when the Bears throw the football, Justin Fields has the league high rate of scrambling off of a pass play that's called. So the two things that we need to look at from a running back perspective are usage in the red zone and design pass plays. Like, everything else is gravy after that. So for Roschon Johnson, who is talented enough to be a league winner, to actually become a league winner, he needs like 2 injuries and Justin Fields to become a real NFL quarterback. Like, that's the story you have to tell yourself to get there. Otherwise, the best that you're going to get with Roschon Johnson is maybe a flex consideration, and that's not going to be predictable, because they're going to have to figure out a way to get him a football they're going to have to figure out a way to get him a football while benching Khalil Herbert, unless Herbert gets hurt. And then even if something like that happens, Deonta Foreman's still going to be there. So are we going to get a healthy scratch on Foreman? And then Justin Fields, we're going to need those design passing plays to Roschon Johnson, and Justin Fields not to be the red zone threat when the bad Bills or Bears offense gets into the red zone. It's a mess for a guy to stash on the bottom of your roster at this point. And I bring this up because somebody left a comment about whether or not to drop Cam Akers, and Cam Akers was in the running back dead zone this year. Cam Akers was in the running back dead zone. How he finished last year was intriguing, even though last year, the coaches are coming out and they're saying coach speak, and they're saying, like, we like Kerwin Williams. They said it again this year, and everybody's like, oh, I'm going to go off of the draft status and all this other stuff of Cam Akers. And then Cam Akers goes and gets a whole bunch of meaningless touches at the end of a blowout. And the Rams went out and they drafted Zach Evans as in the 6th round of the draft. He was inactive to start the season. And I don't think Zach Evans is that good at football, but I mean, he's like 5'11", 202, 4'5", 140, type of guy. I mean, there's stuff to like about him. And whether or not I would keep Cam Akers on my team, versus Kerwin Williams, or even stashing a Zach Evans, is because if Kerwin Williams goes down, do I think it's more likely that the Rams elevate Cam Akers to that RB1 role and just use him as a workhorse after he almost got traded last year? He left the team at a certain point. He has a blown Achilles. Or they actually elevate Zach Evans, a 6th round draft pick who they kept on their active roster, made inactive. And, if it comes down to a Kerwin Williams injury or the season just getting out of hand, is it worth it to the Rams to just go, like, we don't want to see what we got in this guy that we spent a 6th round pick on? Now, 6th round pick is not particularly good, but there's a reason why I'm talking about the draft capital in these guys, like how we tell the story. is there a better chance that Zach Evans has a road to league winner than Roschon Johnson, who I think is a tremendous player? The Bears basically just took him because, like, hey, he fell in their laps in the 4th round. Because I actually thought there was a chance that Roschon Johnson could go at the back end of the 1st, depending on how teams viewed how good or bad the draft class was, because this is a 3-down player. He projects as a 3-down player as opposed to some of the less perfect talents that were coming out of the draft. So I bring up Zach Evans because now we got to talk about Devon Achane and why there's still a chance that he's a league winner. And, he's a 3rd-round pick. He didn't play. The coach came out and said, there's other considerations that had to be taken into account, basically like special teams, why he didn't play. When we look at the Dolphins contract situation at running back, it kind of spells it out. Like Alex Ingold, who played like 45% of snaps as a fullback, he's making $4 million a year. They already paid him $4 million guaranteed out the door. He's going to play your special teams. They play a lot of fullback. They actually will use him as the single back in the set sometimes. 45% of snaps. That's one of the guys they kept on their roster. Where's the rest of the running backs if I can find them? Anyway, they have other guys. I got to pull it up. Sorry, I mistaken that. So Jeff Wilson is probably not injured. Jeff Wilson is just like, hey, we need to figure out a way to stash you so we can get later on in the season and then deal with this problem. The same way that Chris, what's his face? The receiver for the Jets is probably not retired. He's just like hanging out until they need him later on in the season. So Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert are making like $2+ million a year. They've already guaranteed this money. They're on 2-year deals. The Jets have already, or the Dolphins have already paid this money. It's out the door. They cut them or they trade them. They've already paid them this money. And then Chris Brooks is a banger. He's like 6'2", 220, undrafted free agent. He made the active roster. And the same thing with Solomon Ahmed. Like, they can cut an Ahmed or a Brooks and it doesn't matter. So like when you're doing your roster construction for Devon Achane, like he has to be able to play special teams or he has to play the game. And you already have Raheem Mostert as your starting running back. And it's like, okay, well, what are we going to do with this other guy when we have like fullbacks that we got to keep active because they're going to actually play 45% of snaps. And I have Durham Smythe pulled up here when we talk about like how we're going to view guys on our team. Durham Smythe, the tight end for the Dolphins, understanding like roster construction and how teams view guys. Durham Smythe played 100% of snaps for the Dolphins. He had 84% route participation, so he was running routes. So that means that on the plays that he was running routes, if there's a guy staying in the block, it's a running back. It's not Durham Smythe, and Durham Smythe is not necessarily a vertical seam ripper. He's like a 4'8" guy. He's a blocker. That's what he's been known to do, and he's running routes for the Dolphins, right? And they're keeping a fullback on the field 45% of the time. There's a pattern behind how the Dolphins are using their personnel, and some of it, like, as a front office, and I could talk about the Falcons, and I guess I will here. I'll ramble on about how poorly the Falcons are run as an organization from a fantasy perspective. But like all these things are going on, and then we get to our good old buddy Devon Achane, and here's a guy, 3rd round draft capital. He's undersized, but the argument about why guys are undersized is not a good argument because the best players are going to play, and especially in the NFL, they will run the wheels off the guys that are the best players, because they need to win games. You can't win games back after you lose them. It's the same thing in fantasy football. You have to win your weeks. You can't plan for the future. I have lost chips because I was getting cute and trying to make moves for a theoretical fantasy football playoffs that I never made to, dropping 130 points in the finals or would-be finals that I never got to because I had theoretically created this great bench that was going to be ready for the playoff push. And I needed those 1 or 2 extra wins to get in. It's not how it works. Like, you've got to put the guys on the field or guys in your lineups that are going to get you points. That's talking about yesterday with the the Eagles, those guys they're gonna cost you a couple weeks, and if they happen at the wrong time because of your lineup configuration, they're gonna cost you the actual win versus loss. And at the bottom of our bench, we can stash guys at the bottom of our bench that just don't matter. Like a Devin A-Chain doesn't matter to me at the bottom of my bench because like he's not seeing my lineup. And how long would it take for me to actually put Devin A-Chain in my lineup at this point? It's going to take weeks. Like I have to see the snap participation go up. I'm going to have to see the usage. He has a road to win fantasy in a way that Roschon Johnson will never have, because they can start using Devin A-Chain. As I pull him up again, they can start using Devin A-Chain in the two places that we want to use him: in the red zone, because he is an inside zone runner, and in design passing plays, because that's how he was used at Texas A&M. Like that's why a guy like this checks all the boxes, and it's at the bottom of our roster week in and week out. A Tajay Spears is at the bottom of our roster because he's a 3-down back. And if Derrick Henry goes down or there's some tomfoolery going on in Tennessee, we have a league winner. So when we look at rankings, what we're looking at with rankings, and James Conner is a very good example on ESPN. James Conner is ranked 11 this week. James Conner is a solid RB2. James Conner will neither win you your league, nor will he lose you your league. What are you going to get out of James Conner? So from a roster construction standpoint, like I can take a little bit more of a risk with James Conner in my lineup because I know he's going to get me like 10 points. Like and there's a chance he's going to fall in the end zone. But I know that I have this guy that's such a volume-based guy that like matching him up with another guy, like say like what we thought Kenneth Walker was going to be this year. It looks like Kenneth Walker is going to be like not what we thought he was. It looks like he's going to be a bell cow, staying in on passing downs and pass blocking. But anyway, like we can put a guy that has higher upside with a guy that has a floor and go, okay, well, the guy, my RB1 is functioning as, my RB2. My RB2 is functioning as my RB1. So like when we break down the stories of guys on rosters, like when is Cam Akers going to help me win? When can I tell the story of Cam Akers being anything more than a guy I throw in my lineup and go like, hopefully he falls in the end zone this week? Is he going to get design passing plays to him? Is he going to get red zone carries? Going back, is he on a good offense? Is he on an okay offense, but he's the greatest player on the offense? The other thing that I guess I cleared out was the Vegas lines. Like we can go through and we can look at like who has the best upsides for points if you really need to get that far. Like I don't really look at that very often because like your lineup or your roster is your roster. You're kind of limited on what your options are to play guys. Like if you get to the point where you have like a bench that is just as good as your lineup, you're probably in a bad situation. Like a few years back, when I had Brady and Aaron Rodgers, their number 1 and number 2 quarterback, and I couldn't figure out which one to start because it was basically like a 1A, 1B. The difference was going to be like 1.5 points a game. Like it doesn't help me, but from a strategy standpoint, someone else doesn't have that guy to hurt me. So like how we're building these things. So, guys that are going to be the third option in an offense, like are we hoping that that's their week, that they have that spike week? Like how many weeks am I going to get out of them that matter from a fantasy perspective? Because they're the number 3 slot. They're going to go for like 800 yards, maybe 6 touchdowns. And if I have them in my lineup for the course of like, 17 weeks, I'm going to get like 6 winnable games out of it. Like that's what we're working with. And if I have that guy and I'm running him out of flex, like I can probably get away with that most weeks. But I'm not going to win a championship with that guy. And it's like, well, how many guys do I have on my roster that are going to get me a championship? So when I start looking at like my RB2 or excuse me, my RB3s and my wide receiver 3s on my lineup, those are the guys that are going to play for me. Like I'm going to get weeks out of those guys because they're going to be my main guys that go into my buys. And I'm going to get weeks out of them. And once I start getting to my RB4s and my wide receiver 4s down the line, like who do I have on there? Like having a Matt Stafford on the bottom of my bench, who's potentially could be a top 10 quarterback this year if he's back, probably has more value to me, at least from a standpoint of a block, than it does from having a Cam Akers on the bottom of my bench. I can't tell the story about how Cam Akers wins me a league. It's very difficult for me to tell the story about how Roschon wins my league. So right now, like a JSN after 1 week, like if he's not being schemed up to get the ball for the Seahawks, it's hard to tell the story about how he wins me a league. Like Elijah Moore for the Browns, that's an interesting one because of the snap share and the targets, and then they're getting him in the running game. He had a carry last week, and now it's like, ooh, like that guy's a wide receiver too. Like how can I get a hold of that guy at the bottom of my bench? Because maybe there's enough there that like he's an upside flex play for me, and that gives me a positional advantage against my opponent. Like, do I have that guy at the bottom of my bench, or am I stashing I don't know a Roschon Johnson? Those are the things that I'm looking at. So like when I look at like people are putting out their rankings this week, like it doesn't matter. Like I'm playing the best guys that I have, and at a certain point, like do I have these upside matchups that tell me like it's this week to play the guy? Like if I had DeAndre Swift, like I'm playing him this week. As soon as Kenneth Gainwell goes down, like he's just in my lineup. That's just what the tea leaves told me to do. Like Jamal Williams down here is running back 22. Like, is there a chance he falls into the end zone? Yes. What are the chances that Jamal Williams gets like 22 carries and 7 receptions for 30-point week this week? Like what are the chances that he can put that together as my running back too? Like, I'm not saying these guys are bad. I'm not saying they're bad at football, but I'm saying like, how do I get these guys off my roster if I have them picked up? And if I do pick them up, like how am I going to turn this into a trade? Like, is anybody going to trade for Jamal Williams? Like, those are the things that you're looking at. And because again, you have to take the risk. If you put together your little engine that could teams, you're probably going to fizzle out in like the first round of the playoffs, or you're going to get to a money game and one of those juggernaut teams that hit on this year's Cooper Kupp or this year Josh Jacobs are going to kill you. So like, from a sit start perspective, like it's tough, but if I spent capital on him this early, I'm playing him. Like if I have a Puka Nacua on my roster because I spent for him in free agency, like I'm gonna play him because I spent on him. Like if I'm going, oh, this is a bad matchup against the 49ers, like why did I spend on him? Like I didn't believe in him enough. Now he's not a wide receiver 2, he's a wide receiver 3-4. That maybe I shouldn't have spent on him. If I got him for $6, then that's great. But if I spent $30 to get Puka Nacua, like I'm saying he's a startable guy. Like I'm going to play him every single week I can until the wheels fall off. And the wheels might fall off this week against the 49ers, but that's where my mindset is. Like, go out on your shield. So again, like like a Samaje Perine, like he's a fine player. Like, is he going to help me win a league? Well, maybe not. And I'm not saying go out and release these guys, but like the roster construction about how to get about these things. Like, who do you have on the bottom of your bench to turn into that guy that in week 15 in the semifinals, or excuse me, in the opening round of the playoffs, like puts up a 30? Like, is Samaje Perine going to put up a 30? These are the guys. Like, how do I figure out to turn a Samaje Perine into a Tajay Spears? Because that's what I need to do if they're on the bottom of my roster. So like looking at some of the stuff, and I'm kind of rambling on for a little too long, more than I expected to do today, and just kind of repeating myself. But like, those are the guys that like I'm looking at and going like, how do they help me win? A Tyler Lockett at this point, like he's probably a low end wide receiver 2, a high end wide receiver 3, that he has some value. But like, if I'm taking a guy off the waiver wire and I'm putting him on my bench, and I'm like, oh, this is what I got. Like, a better example that I was just looking at here is Marquise Brown. Like, tell me the story with the Cardinals quarterback situation where Marquise Brown wins you your championship. And the further we go down, like when we talk about roster constructions, like why are they going to bring out Kyler Murray this year? Like they are in they're in a hole if he gets hurt again, because then a whole bunch of his money gets guaranteed. Like, what is the upside to rolling out Kyler Murray? If someone gets lucky and they've been sitting on Marquise Brown, or they dump a boat on Marquise Brown because Kyler Murray comes back and he becomes like, a fantasy league winner, like I can live with that. I can live with that at the end of the day because someone saw tea leaves that I didn't see. But like, if I have a Cam Akers, or if my opponent has a Cam Akers on their roster and he decides to put him into their lineup, and this is different for me because like the guy that I'm playing this week has Roschon Johnson in his lineup. That guy does not scare me. Now, is there a chance that Roschon goes off this week, puts up a 20 bomb because like he gets high efficiency? Yes, because it's always about the king of fantasy is opportunity, and the queen is efficiency, and Roschon just gets efficient this week, and that's just the way the cookie crumbles. I've had those weeks, sure, but again, like, that's how I'm looking at these things from a ranking standpoint. Like, I don't care what the rankings say. Is this my best player? Do I have the most capital into him? I got to play him right now because I'm not to the point in the season where I'm worried about like capital. Like, I'm not dropping a 5th round pick because I spent a 5th round pick on him. In 4 or 5 weeks, like, that guy, it doesn't matter to me the same way. But right now, like, he's my best player. I'm rolling him out there. Those are the stories that I'm telling myself. That's how I'm deciding who's on the bottom of my bench. Who's in my lineup right now. It's not rankings. It's not any of those things. Like, I just have to be able to set my lineup and go about my day because I don't control the outcome of fantasy football. So anyway, that's about all I got. Maybe something later.